A dragon child's last hope, the brother he lost, the human who refused to give up. Before we start the story, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. This story is for every one of you. The village of Ashenvale sat at the edge of the scorched reaches, where the ground still remembered fire. It was not a place humans were supposed to be. The Treaty of the Five Peaks had drawn clear lines. Dragons held the volcanic highlands, the crystal forests, and the river deltas rich with mineral water. Humans were given the flatlands to the west, the coastal trading ports, and the gray farmland that bordered the reaches. Nobody wanted the reaches. The soil was dead, the air tasted like old iron, and the ruins of a war nobody alive had fought still jutted from the earth like broken teeth. But humans had a habit of going where nobody wanted them. Sergeant Cole Marin had been in Ashenvale for 11 months. He was 43 years old, broad-shouldered, with hands that had repaired everything from military field communicators to water purification rigs to the cracked spine of a child's music box. He had the kind of face that had stopped being handsome years ago and settled into something better, trustworthy. The lines around his eyes were deep. His gray-streaked hair was always cut short. He did not waste words and he did not waste time. He had come to Ashenvale as part of the Joint Reconstruction Corps, a quiet diplomatic program that sent human engineers and medics into dragon border territories to help rebuild what the war had left behind. The program had no soldiers technically. Cole had handed in his rank patch on arrival. But old habits of discipline do not vanish when you remove a badge. He still woke before dawn. He still made mental maps of every building he entered. He still kept his toolkit clean and his mind sharper. The Corps operated out of a converted stone hall near the center of the village. 6 humans total. Cole was the senior technician. Ashenvale was a community of roughly 400 dragonkin, a term that described the broader population of draconic peoples who were not full-blooded dragons but carried the bloodline in varying degrees. Most residents stood between 7 and 9 feet tall, with scaled skin ranging from deep obsidian to warm copper, and eyes that shifted color depending on their mood. They were not hostile to the humans. They were not warm either. They watched the core team the way you watch a stray animal that has wandered into your yard, wary, uncertain, not yet willing to act. Cole understood. He did not push. He spent his days fixing things. The water cistern valve that had been leaking for 2 years. The grain storage doors whose hinges had warped in the heat cycles. The village elder's communication dish, which had not received a signal since before the armistice. He asked for nothing in return. He explained what he was doing while he worked in plain language so the villagers could repeat it themselves if something broke again after he was gone. Slowly the wariness softened. Not into friendship, not yet. Into something more careful than that. Respect maybe. Or at least the beginning of it. It was on a cold morning in the 11th month that sorrow found him. Cole was crouched in the eastern alley behind the forge building, replacing a corroded pipe junction, when he heard the footsteps. Small ones. He turned. The child was young, perhaps 6 or 7 in dragonkin years, which put him at roughly equivalent to a human child of 8 or 9. His scales were a pale silver blue, unusual for Ashenvale where darker tones dominated. His eyes were wide and amber and currently fixed on Cole with an intensity that went well beyond curiosity. He was holding something against his chest with both arms, cradling it like it was either very precious or very fragile. Possibly both. Cole set down his wrench. He did not stand up immediately. He had learned that lowering his height made young dragonkin less nervous. He stayed crouched at something closer to the child's eye level and waited. The boy took 3 careful steps forward. Then he held out the thing he had been carrying. It was a mechanical figure. Roughly 18 inches tall. Humanoid in rough shape but clearly built to a draconic aesthetic. The joints were articulated with small carved scale detailing, the chest plate bore a painted symbol Cole did not recognize, and the face, though stylized, had been crafted with obvious care. It was the kind of toy a skilled parent makes for a child by hand. Not manufactured. Made with intention. It was also shattered. The left arm was snapped at the elbow joint. The chest plate had a deep crack running from shoulder to hip. 2 of the finger joints on the right hand were missing entirely. The internal mechanism, Cole could see where the casing had split, was a tangle of tiny coiled springs and gear teeth, at least 3 of which were bent beyond their tolerance. The child looked at him. Then he said, in the careful, accented common tongue that the younger Ashenvale generation had been learning since the treaty, "Can you make him work again?" Cole looked at the broken figure. Then he looked at the child's face, at the set of his jaw, the brightness behind those amber eyes that was not excitement but something older and more careful. something that had already survived disappointment and was bracing for more. He picked up the figure gently with both hands and examined it. The damage was significant. The internal spring mechanism would need full disassembly. The cracked chest plate would need bonding resin and a mold form to reset cleanly. The missing finger joints would have to be fabricated from scratch. None of it was beyond him. "What's his name?" Cole asked. The child blinked. He had not expected that question. "Davin," the boy said quietly. "My brother named him Davin." Cole looked up. "Brother." Past tense in the way the child had said it. Not "my brother calls him" but "my brother named him." The kind of past tense that sits heavy. "What's your name?" Cole asked. "Sorrow." Cole turned the figure over carefully in his hands, examining the back casing, the joint tolerances, the quality of the original construction. Whoever had built this had known what they were doing. The design was clean. The craft was deliberate. This had been made for a specific child, with full attention, with love. "Sorrow," Cole said, "I'm going to need 3 days. Maybe 4. And I'm going to need you to tell me everything you remember about how he moved, what sounds he made, what he could do. Can you do that?" The child stared at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. Cole nodded back. He carried Davin inside and set him on his workbench beneath the good light. He cleared everything else away. He got out his finest tools. He had no idea yet what he was actually holding, what the figure meant, what it was connected to, or what saying yes to one small child in a cold alley was about to cost him. But that was always the way it started. Cole worked methodically the way he did everything. He began with documentation, sketching the figure's original assembly from the visible components before he disassembled anything. 23 years in military engineering had given him one unbreakable habit. Never take apart what you cannot put back together, and never put it back together from memory when you can put it back together from notes. Sorrow sat on a crate in the corner of the core workroom and watched. He did not speak at first. He just watched Cole's hands. The other core members moved around them, Physician Adara logging medical supply requests, Junior Engineer Fen calibrating a solar reader, Liaison Officer Bex reviewing community meeting transcripts. They gave Cole's corner a wide berth, not because they were unwelcoming but because they recognized the look on his face. It was the look that meant I am doing a precise thing and I would prefer not to be interrupted. After an hour, Cole set down his tool and turned to Sorrow. "Tell me about your brother." Sorrow's amber eyes steadied. He pulled his knees up to his chest. "His name was Rin," Sorrow said. "He was 12. He built Davin when I was 3. He said every little brother deserved something to keep them company when things were scary." Cole waited. "Rin died 8 months ago," Sorrow said. "There was a fire in the lower tunnels. He went in to pull out Elder Moss's youngest daughter. He got her out." Pause. "He didn't come out after." Cole was quiet for a moment. Then, "He sounds like someone worth remembering." "Davin is the only moving thing Rin made," Sorrow said. "He made other things, carvings, painted stones, a wind chime out of hollow iron pieces, but Davin is the only one that moves. Rin said moving things stay more alive." Sorrow looked at the disassembled figure on the workbench. "I dropped him. I didn't mean to. I was running and I fell and Davin hit the stone floor and I couldn't." He stopped. "Reset. I couldn't fix him. I tried. I made it worse." Cole looked at the bent gear teeth, the snapped elbow, the cracked chest. "You didn't make it worse," he said. "You tried to help. That's not the same thing." Sorrow did not look entirely convinced. But he did not argue. Cole turned back to the figure and continued his examination. As he worked through the internal mechanism, something made him slow down. He had been expecting a simple wind-up spring system, the kind of basic escapement mechanism that produced a walking or arm-swinging motion in traditional mechanical toys. What he found instead was considerably more sophisticated. The internal assembly was a compound gear train. 12 separate gear stages, each linked in sequence, with a dual spring drive that allowed for 2 distinct motion programs depending on which tension key was engaged. The first motion, clearly the primary one, was a walking gait. 4-limbed, with counterbalance articulation in the shoulders that kept the figure upright through a full stride cycle. That was impressive enough. But the second motion program was something Cole had to look at 3 times before he trusted what he was seeing. It was a signing sequence. Dragonkin used a formal gesture language for ceremonial and emotional expression. Cole had been studying it since his 2nd month in Ashenvale. The motions were specific and codified. And the second program in Davin's mechanism produced a 22-step gesture sequence that Cole, after cross-referencing his own notes, identified as the traditional Ashenvale morning benediction. The blessing you give the dead so they know they are not forgotten. A 12-year-old child had designed and hand-built a mechanical figure capable of performing a sacred morning rite. Cole sat back in his chair. He looked at Sorrow, who was watching him with the careful eyes of a child who had learned not to hope too loudly. "Your brother was extraordinary," Cole said. Sorrow's jaw tightened, not with grief but with the effort of holding something in. "I know," he said. Cole turned back to the workbench. The cracked chest plate. The missing finger joints. The bent gears. He pulled his notebook closer and began writing a proper repair plan. The chest plate crack could be managed with high-temp bonding resin and a plaster mold to maintain the contour while it cured. He had both in stores. The elbow break was a cleaner problem than it looked. The joint socket was intact, and if he could fabricate a new pin from brass stock, the arm would function. The bent gears were the real problem. 3 of the 12 gear stages were compromised. 2 he could true up with careful work on the bench vise. The third, the 7-stage gear which connected the dual spring outputs, was bent past recovery. It would need to be remade. He did not have a gear-cutting lathe. The core workroom had general fabrication tools but nothing with the precision tolerance for a component this small. He spent the rest of that day thinking about the problem while he handled the repairs he could make immediately. He bonded the chest plate. He fabricated the elbow pin. He trued 2 of the 3 bent gears. He cleaned every component, relubricated the spring chambers, and reseated every gear stage that did not need replacement. He also asked Sorrow detailed questions about Davin's movements, which directions the arms swung, how the head tilted, what sounds the mechanism made when it was running well. Sorrow's memory was precise. He had watched that figure move thousands of times. He described it with his hands as much as his words, and Cole sketched the motion arcs into his notebook. That evening, Cole went to the village forge. The blacksmith was a heavy-set dragonkin named Karath who had worked with Cole twice before on structural repairs and had moved from watchful tolerance to something approaching comfort in his presence. Cole explained what he needed, not in vague terms but with a sketch of the gear geometry, the tooth pitch, the bore diameter. He asked if Karath had a small lathe or a gear hobbing setup. Karath studied the sketch for a long moment. "I have a rotary file mount," he said finally. "Old. Hand-cranked. I use it for detail work on ceremonial pieces." He paused. "That pitch is very fine." "I know," Cole said. "You think you can hold tolerance by hand?" "I think I can get close enough to test, true it up if needed, and try again if I have to." Karath looked at him steadily. "Why does this matter to you?" "It is a child's toy." Cole considered the question. "A 12-year-old boy," he said, "who had never been trained as a machinist, designed a compound gear train with a dual-program motion system and built it by hand. Then he encoded his people's morning benediction into the second program so his little brother would always have a way to honor the dead." He paused. "The child who owns it dropped it while running and broke it, and he came to me because he didn't know who else to ask. He's 7 years old and he's been carrying that broken thing for weeks." Karath was quiet. "The gear needs to be right," Cole said simply. "Not close. Right." After a long pause, Karath stepped back from the counter and gestured toward the back of the forge. "Come," he said. "I will show you the lathe." Cole worked on the gear for 2 full days. He did not rush. Rushing was how you ruined fine work, and he had decided early that this would not be fine work. It would be the best work he had ever done. Not because anyone would see it. The gear was barely the size of his thumbnail. Not because it would earn him anything. There was no reward here, no commendation, no record in any core log. Because it had to be right. Karath gave him unrestricted access to the rotary file mount and a length of brass stock. He also, on the second morning, set down a cup of hot forge tea on the workbench beside Cole without comment and went back to his own work. Cole drank it without interrupting either of them. It was, in its quiet way, one of the more significant moments of his 11 months in Ashenvale. The gear geometry was the hard part. Rin had designed the 7-stage gear as the coupling between the 2 spring outputs. It needed to mesh cleanly with both the walking gate train on one side and the benediction sequence drive on the other. The tooth profile had to be precise. Too shallow and the gear would slip under load. Too steep and it would bind. Cole measured the surviving mating gears with his finest calipers, calculated the required pitch and pressure angle, and made 3 test blanks before he cut the first serious attempt. The first attempt was close. Not close enough. He studied where it failed, a slight unevenness in the tooth spacing at the 7 o'clock position, and adjusted his technique. He was holding the file at a fractionally wrong angle during the finish pass. He corrected it. He cut a second gear. Better. He test-fitted it in the partially assembled mechanism, turned the spring key slowly by hand. The gears meshed. The motion transferred. He cycled through 3 full walking strides on the bench. Then he engaged the second program and watched the arm sequence begin. It moved wrong. He stopped the mechanism immediately and examined it. The motion was not incorrect. The gear engagement was good, but something in the second program's timing was off. The benediction sequence was running 2 steps out of phase, which meant a gesture was arriving early, which meant the meaning of the sequence was altered. He knew enough of the gesture language to know what the original sequence said. You are not forgotten. You are carried. You are loved. What the phase-shifted version said was something closer to, you are waiting. You are lost. That was not acceptable. He disassembled again. Studied the second program's spring chamber. Found the issue, not in his new gear but in the intermediate cam that triggered the program switch. It had been slightly bent in the original damage and he had not caught it because it was subtle and because the first program had tested clean. He straightened the cam with a fine pick tool, reset it, reassembled the mechanism. Tested again. The walking gait ran true. He engaged the second program. Davin's arms rose. The hands moved, not smoothly yet but with the right sequencing. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3. Cole watched each gesture against his own notes. Step 9. The central pose, both arms extended with the palms forward, the morning heart of the whole sequence, held for exactly the right duration and then released cleanly into Step 10. All 22 steps completed. Cole sat very still for a moment. He cycled it twice more to be certain. Both times perfect. He did not cheer. He did not make any sound at all. He just sat with it for a moment, the particular quiet that comes after precise work finally lands. Then he began the final assembly. He bonded the chest plate with the resin mold he'd prepared on day 1, clamping it in position with a soft jaw press and letting it cure fully before proceeding. He set the new elbow pin. He fitted the repaired finger joints. He had spent an evening carving 2 replacement pieces from a dense hardwood and coating them with brass tone pigment that Karath had mixed for him without being asked. They were not metal. But they were sized correctly, they moved correctly, and from any normal viewing distance they matched. He painted the hairline crack on the chest plate with a compound of the original pigment colors that Sorrow had helped him identify from memory. The repair line was still faintly visible if you knew where to look. Cole considered filling it further and then decided not to. The line was part of the history now. Hiding it entirely would be a kind of lie. He cleaned the exterior, polished the scale detailing on the joints, tested every articulated part. Davin was whole. On the evening of the 4th day, Cole sent a message through Adara to ask Sorrow to come to the workroom the next morning. He did not sleep particularly well that night. This surprised him. He had repaired hundreds of things in his career, some of them critical systems on which lives had depended. A mechanical toy should not have produced this particular weight in his chest. But there it was. He lay in the dark and thought about a 12-year-old boy studying gear geometry by lamplight, designing a morning sequence for a brother who had not yet lost anyone, encoding love into brass and spring so it would keep moving after he could not. He thought about the fire in the lower tunnels. He thought about a child who had not come out. He thought about Sorrow, 7 years old, running and falling and hearing the crack of the only moving thing his brother had ever made. In the morning he got up before dawn and made sure the workroom was clean and orderly. He placed Davin on the center of the workbench, standing upright, under the good light. Then he waited. Sorrow arrived just after sunrise. He came alone, which Cole had expected. He always came alone, without parents or elders, which said something about either the boy's self-sufficiency or the degree to which the adults in his life did not yet know he had been spending his mornings with the human technician. Possibly both. He stopped in the doorway. He saw Davin on the workbench, standing, upright, intact, and he went very still. Cole stayed where he was, off to the side, and said nothing. He had learned over 4 days of working with Sorrow that the child needed a moment when things were significant. He did not process quickly. He processed deeply. Sorrow walked forward slowly. He stopped at the edge of the workbench and looked at the figure for a long time. Cole watched the child's face move through something. He couldn't name all of it. Recognition. Something that was not quite disbelief but was adjacent to it. Something careful and large. He's standing, Sorrow said. He's standing, Cole confirmed. Sorrow reached out one hand. His fingertips hovered over the chest plate, over the faint repair line without touching it. You can touch it, Cole said. He's solid. Sorrow pressed one finger gently against the chest, then his whole hand. He tilted Davin slightly to look at the left arm. Checked the elbow joint. Looked at the right hand, turning it over carefully to examine the finger joints. These aren't metal, Sorrow said quietly, touching the 2 replacement fingers. No, Cole said. I didn't have the right stock. They're carved hardwood with a coating. They'll hold. If they ever wear, I've left you the measurements so any woodworker can replace them. Sorrow looked at him. Then back at the figure. Can he stopped. Does he still? Turn the key on his back, Cole said. The top one first. Sorrow found the key. He turned it carefully, slowly, 6 full rotations, the way Cole had shown him the spring loading worked. Then he set Davin on the floor, upright, and let go. Davin walked. The motion was smooth and even, the 4-limbed walking gait with the counterbalanced shoulder articulation, just as Rin had designed it. The small figure moved across 3 feet of stone floor and then ran the spring down to stillness. Sorrow's breath had gone uneven. The second key, Cole said quietly. Sorrow crouched. He wound the second key, slower this time because his hands were not quite steady. He stood the figure and stepped back. Davin began the benediction. The arms rose in the first gesture. The hands moved, the slow, deliberate arc of the opening statement. Cole watched Sorrow's face instead of the figure. He saw the exact moment the child recognized what was happening, the slight parting of the mouth, the amber eyes going wide. He had seen the benediction before. He knew what it was. But Cole did not think Sorrow had ever seen Davin perform it, because Rin had built the second program into the figure after his brother was old enough to understand the gesture language. This was very likely the first time Sorrow had watched his brother's creation speak the words for the dead. The sequence ran all 22 steps. You are not forgotten. You are carried. You are loved. When it finished, Davin stood still in the center of the floor. Sorrow did not move for a long moment. Then he sat down on the floor, simply folded down, and put both hands over his face. He did not make sounds. His shoulders moved. Cole sat down on the floor nearby, not close enough to crowd him, close enough to be present. He did not say anything useful. There was nothing useful to say. He just stayed, which was what staying was for. After a while, Sorrow lowered his hands. His eyes were red at the edges. Dragonkin did not shed tears the way humans did, but the physiological distress response produced a similar flushing. He looked at Cole with an expression that was too complicated and too honest for his age. He made that for me, Sorrow said. The second part. He added it after I learned the gestures. He didn't tell me. I know, Cole said. He knew something might happen to him. Pause. He built it in any way. Yes. Sorrow looked at the still figure on the floor. He was always doing that. Building things that would last after he was done with them. Even when he was little. His voice was not breaking. It was just very quiet. Elder Masa told me that's rare. That most people don't think past themselves. Your brother thought past everything, Cole said. Sorrow was quiet for a moment. Then, how did you fix the second part? My father tried to look at it once. He said the gear system was too fine for him. Cole explained. He kept it simple, the compound gear train, the phase error in the cam, the 7th gear. He described what had gone wrong and what he had done about it and how he had found Karatha's lathe and why 3 attempts were better than 1. He spoke the way he always spoke to Sorrow, directly, without condescension, as though the child was a person who deserved honest explanations rather than simplified reassurance. Sorrow listened carefully. You made the gear yourself, Sorrow said. Yes. Because you didn't have the right tools. I had close to the right tools. Close enough to work with patience. Sorrow looked at him steadily. Rin would have wanted to know you, he said. It was said simply as a fact without sentiment wrapping it, which made it land harder than any decorated version would have. Cole held that for a moment. I would have wanted to know him too, he said. He picked up Davin from the floor and handed the figure to Sorrow. The child held it the way he had held it in the alley 4 days ago, with both arms, carefully. But something was different now. The bracing was gone from his face. What was there instead was not exactly peace. But it was something adjacent to it. Something that had been let down from a held position. Thank you, Sorrow said. It was good work to do, Cole said. And he meant it. The story did not end in the workroom. Endings rarely are where they look like they are. 3 days after Cole returned Davin, Elder Masa came to the core hall. Masa was the eldest of Ashenvale's governing council, a full-blooded dragon elder whose scales were deep charcoal shot through with threads of old gold, whose presence in any room shifted the weight of it. She had spoken to Cole twice in 11 months, both times briefly and on administrative matters. She was not hostile. She was formal in the way that people are formal when they have not yet decided what to make of you. She came to his workbench. She stood and looked at the ordered tools, the careful sketches, the meticulous notes. She did not speak immediately. Cole set down his work and waited. "Sorrow told me what you did," she said. "He came to me for help," Cole said. "I helped." "You rebuilt the 7-stage gear from scratch on a hand lathe," Masa said, "using nothing but measurements and patience, because you could not leave the second program broken." Pause. "You know what the second program is?" "I do." "You restored the benediction for a grieving child. In the correct form. With the correct timing." Her voice had a quality he could not quite read. "Do you understand what that means for our people?" "That the words were right." "I tried to make it right," Cole said. "I studied what I had to study. I wasn't willing to return it wrong." Masa was quiet for a long moment. "When the Joint Reconstruction Corps was first proposed," she said slowly, "many on the council opposed it. We have our own builders. Our own healers. We did not need outsiders deciding what was broken and what needed fixing." She paused. "I was not one of those who opposed it. But I was not one of those who welcomed it either. I waited to see." She looked at him. "A 12-year-old child built something extraordinary," she said. "And he is gone. But what he built is still moving because you refused to give up on a gear the size of your thumbnail." She paused. "You did not do it for credit. You did not report it in your core logs. You did not tell anyone what it meant, you simply made it correct." "It wasn't mine to announce," Cole said. Masa was quiet again. Then she said, "I would like to propose something to the council. The reconstruction work your team has been doing is valuable. But there is a deeper need here, a need for transfer, not just repair. We have young builders in this village. People like Rin who have the instinct and the gift but no formal training, no vocabulary for what they already intuitively understand." She looked at him steadily. "I am asking if you would be willing to teach." Cole was still. "Not just your technical staff," Masa said. "You specifically. Because a person who rebuilds a sacred morning sequence by hand on a village lathe, to get it exactly right for a 7-year-old child, is a person I want teaching our builders." The silence between them was thoughtful rather than uncomfortable. "I would need the council's formal agreement," Cole said. "And I would want the students to be willing, not assigned." "Understood. And I would want to learn as much as I teach. Some of what your builders already know is not in any of my training." Masa's expression shifted, something subtle, but Cole had been watching dragonkin faces for 11 months. It was close to approval. Perhaps the beginning of respect. "That," she said, "is also acceptable." The teaching program began 6 weeks later. Cole ran it out of the forge with Karatha's permission and eventually Karatha's participation. The blacksmith had his own considerable knowledge to pass on and found, somewhat to his own surprise, that he did not mind Cole's company during the process. There were 9 students in the first cohort. 3 were young adults who already worked in skilled trades. 4 were adolescents whose families had flagged them as technically gifted. 2 were older villagers who had always wanted to know how certain things worked and simply had not had the access. Sorrow was the 10th student. He was younger than the guidelines specified. Masa approved it personally. Sorrow turned out to have his brother's gift. The spatial intuition, the patient attention, the instinct for how moving things fit together. He was not Rin. He would become his own version of something, which was the right outcome. But the lineage of a specific kind of intelligence was clearly alive and present, and Cole spent considerable time over the following months making sure it was fed. On the last day of the first program cycle, Cole took all 10 students to the open courtyard behind the forge. He had built a single object specifically for this occasion, a kinetic hanging sculpture, a mobile of linked brass components that turned and shifted in the wind, each element balanced against the others, the whole system in constant motion without any external input beyond the air around it. He had spent 3 weeks on it in his off hours. It was, he thought, the most purely joyful thing he had built in 20 years. He hung it from the forge's exterior beam. It caught the wind immediately and began to turn. The students watched it. The village children who had followed the group gathered and watched it. Karath came out from inside the forge and stood in the doorway and watched it. Sorrow stood beside Cole and watched the moving pieces shift and turn and counterbalance, the whole system alive and purposeful and self-sustaining. "Rin would have asked you about every joint," Sorrow said. "I know," Cole said. "I'd have enjoyed every question." Sorrow was quiet for a moment. Then, "He built things that would last after he was done with them." "Yes," Cole said. "So will I." It was not said as ambition. It was said as intention. The quiet, solid kind that does not need to be loud because it is already rooted. The kind that builds rather than announces. Cole looked at the mobile turning in the wind. The brass components caught the morning light, each one moving in response to the others, no single piece alone. "I know you will," he said. The wind shifted. The mobile adjusted. The whole thing kept turning. Somewhere back in the village, in a small dwelling with pale blue-gray walls, a mechanical figure stood on a shelf, steady on its repaired legs, its recarved fingers at rest, its seventh gear held to the tolerance of a patient hand and a refusal to quit. Waiting for the next time a small silver-scaled hand would wind the second key and ask the old words to speak again. "You are not forgotten. You are carried. You are loved." Some things, made with enough care and enough courage, keep moving long after the hands that made them are still. That is what humans know how to do. That is what they have always known. End of story. DracoWar HFY Original.